introduce this concept. It has to do with interpersonal dynamics. This box here are the things that make up who we are that we can control. It's not everything, but when it comes to our interactions with other people, these are three very, very important things. Self awareness is really the starting point of any type of effectiveness that we have with others. To the extent that we are knowledgeable of our strengths, aware of how we come across to others, and we're much better to make adjustments when we interact with other people. And then empathy, that's to the extent that we can put ourselves in someone else's shoes, understand their perspective. And then our authenticity, to the extent that we are keeping it real, so to speak. What happens is we express these three things through our communication and our behavior. In other words, people see our actions, they hear what we say. So we're expressing and demonstrating our authenticity, empathy, and self awareness. As a result, that bolsters and improves our credibility and our influence. And we're going to talk more about influence, but credibility is also foundation of influence. The more influence that you have, the more people will be receptive to what you have to say or what ideas that you have. And not everybody is going to be receptive, but that is really the essence of influence. You may recognize some of these people, probably not all of them, but what do you think they all have in common? They all are leaders. Some of them are leaders without having authority. But they definitely had a great amount of influence. They were influenced because their ability to persuade others, the connections that they have with others. Influence is our ability to shape or change other people's thoughts, behaviors, or attitudes. All right. It's a very powerful position. There are different ways that we can go about doing that. But if I could get you to change your mind, or if I could get you to adjust your attitude, that's very powerful. It also is about persuading other people and inspire them to act willingly, as opposed to act out of threat or act because they're afraid of getting in trouble. One of the things that business owners, especially when you start to have a lot of employees, we want to strike the balance between our influence and our authority. Authority is when people do things because it's out of compliance, and it's about because of the position. Whereas influence, they do things because they want to. They do things because they admire you or they trust you and they respect you. So influence is really grounded on trust, respect, and our own credibility. There's so many things that we can do as business owners that can undermine our credibility among our teams. Likewise, lots of things we can do that can undermine our credibility among our customers. One of the key things of influence is practicing empathy. And so empathy is really putting ourselves in the client's shoes or the other person's shoes. Thinking 3 steps ahead, constantly educating, or us not assuming that they are fully aware of everything or everything that could possibly go wrong or even right. When it comes to influence, we already talked about the importance of credibility, but also credibility is when we're consistent and we're reliable. That helps us sustain credibility, but also our ability to connect with others, whether they're customers or partners or people who are on our team. And you get to that point by demonstrating empathy and taking a genuine interest in the things that are important to them, their values, their perspectives, their viewpoints, their needs. So that's really all about the connection. And then how do we persuade? How do we communicate and present our ideas to appeal to the right level of logic and emotion? And so persuasion is not just face to face, but it's also through electronic communication is through how we position ourselves, whether we're using social media or email. All of that is part of that persuasion umbrella. And then what we often might overlook is the idea of reciprocity. And it's really, if we take the attitude of, if we give of ourselves, if we give freely of who we are, what happens is most people are likely to reciprocate. Meaning, if I'm giving of my time or giving of my intellect or giving my energy, when it comes time for me to ask something of someone else, they're more likely to reciprocate in some way. Why do we want more influence as business owners? More influence strengthens our relationships. Again, we become more credible with those who are part of our teams, our investors, and also it generates more business. We get more referrals. Our employees will stick with us longer. So it strengthens our relationships. We help inspire others. When we have more influence, we create more positive energy. We encourage others to take initiative. And when they're part of our team, because they're not acting things just because they report to us, they're more likely to take ownership of whatever their roles are and really run with it. When it comes to change, we can adapt to change a lot quicker. We can persuade our stakeholders to embrace new technologies. When you have more influence, people aren't relying on your authority. They're doing things because they want to do it, not because they have to do it. And when people do things because they want to do it, they're much more engaged. We have to learn when to cut ties or when to help develop. Because in many cases, some people just need further development, which takes time and energy. And some people need to be let go. And in many cases, that might be the best thing that happens to them because they can do some self-reflection and learn. In many cases, employees actually fire themselves. I mean, when employees get to the point where they, especially in a small business, where they get fired, they've done something. So they've actually fired themselves. And a lot of times, if we have an outside business relationship, whether they're family or friends, that might get a little more difficult. And so we have to really do what we can to hold them accountable and set boundaries. And it takes influence to either get them to change or even to cut bait without ill will. Again, when we have influence, when we do want to develop people, those people really become a lot more loyal. And as people are growing, then they give more of themselves. So in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases, when people are not wanting to work, there may be some boredom. There may be something about the job that nobody really likes. And so we may have to find ways where they can get a sense of fulfillment in the work itself. That's, that takes some type of additional intervention. These are just kind of things that we can keep in mind. And then I'll go into more specifics. Active listening. So just by hearing people out, we're giving them a voice, but also being totally paying attention to what they're saying and also showing empathy. Being transparent, that's when we're kind of letting them see a certain side of who we are, but being consistent. And also, if there's an example, if there's a behavior that we want people to exhibit, we want to model that behavior. So leading by example. And then look for genuine ways of establishing a connection, acknowledging people's contributions as well as their strengths, what they've done well and what they're good at. It's okay to praise someone and say, good job, great job. This really helped us today. So here is a really 10-point checklist, the things that we can do day to day that if they become habitual, we can improve our influence with others. And it's not just with the people who are part of our team, it's our partners, it's our customers, and it's other stakeholders. So active listening. First of all, listening is a way of really honoring someone. Just hearing them out, even when someone wants to vent. And a lot of times people just want to listen so they can respond with their own idea or opinion. That takes discipline. But then when it comes time to for us to speak, that's the next one. We want to be as optimistic as we can when it's appropriate. So we want to be clear, we want to be respectful when we're giving information or giving ideas. And if there is a problem, if you can frame those challenges as opportunities, especially when we're giving feedback to our team members, uh, don't just always focus on the things that they've done wrong. Try to frame it as this is a learning opportunity. This is how we can get better at what we do. We talked about empathy. So acknowledge how other people feel, their perspective, and their experiences. When someone is struggling, offer encouragement. But again, empathy starts in our own minds. So before we can express it, we have to kind of demonstrate it mentally. So we have to change our focus and put ourselves in that person's shoes and ask ourselves, okay, what's really going on here? Especially if it's an employee that may be struggling and we don't know it. We can ask them, hey, what's going on? What and try to understand and then make a decision if we have to take corrective action. And we talked about being consistent and reliable in everything we do. That goes without saying. Recognize, and recognize. Praise individuals for their efforts, their contributions, their improvement. And if you can, sometimes people don't like public acknowledgments, but sometimes they do. And we always start off these sessions with wins. That's our opportunities. And sometimes we may acknowledge one of our colleagues' wins. That's always a plus, especially in our places where we lead others. Always staying curious and asking insightful questions that really facilitates others to really think and reflect. Um, so whenever we're curious, we kind of invite others to collaborate, to solve problems jointly. And we can do it not just with our staff, but even with our customers. Demonstrating integrity. It's not always easy for some people, but if our actions align with our words, that really helps us sustain our overall credibility. Here's another one, number 8. Whenever there's stress or some type of emergency or some type of crisis, the more calm we are, that helps those around us, especially if we are the business owner or if we're the leader of a group. We set the tone for the emotional temperature of others. And so one way of getting to that point is um, even in the moment, just take a deep breath, try to be mindful, but really, really staying calm goes a long way. We feel a lot more comfortable when we're around someone else who's confident and self assured. When someone exhibits any kind of discomfort or any type of lack of per- security or obvious insecurity, that even makes us feel uncomfortable. And this is not in a this is just even in the conversational perspective. So people are gravitate toward those who are calm and confident. And then finally, we talked about reciprocity, but when we give of ourselves freely, um, with the attitude that, okay, I'm gonna just give myself not expecting a return. Because if we expect a return or we expect a favor, it's gonna kind of seep out like we have that expectation. But if we just give freely and that's our overall spirit, then things come back to us. When it's time to persuade or get that person to take action, they're more likely to do so because we've established the right amount of credibility and social credits and goodwill. And then finally, constantly learn. Just constantly be open to feedback and practice these things each day. Ask ourselves, how well did I listen today? When I interacted with other people, were they better off after my conversation with them than not? What can I do differently to improve my overall influence? So just being cognizant of, to the extent that we're growing as individuals, And influence really matters. And what am I doing each day to improve my degree of influence? These are just some things to keep in mind. We improve influence each day through small gestures, nothing really grand, the small things such as giving someone a compliment, paying attention, practicing empathy, really, really hearing someone out. If I had to make a choice, I'd rather have influence without authority than to have authority without influence. That is a very miserable place to be when you are, quote unquote, the boss, but nobody respects you or no one wants to listen to you. The other thing I want to realize is influence, as we talked about, is our ability to shape how people think. That is a very, very powerful um, thing to have. So the greater the amount of influence we have, the greater the responsibility. We see a lot of political figures who are extremely influential, and they've had people who, as we talk about it, who've drank the Kool-Aid. So remember, it's great responsibility. More people we influence, we have to be very judicious in how we shape other people's minds.